Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to a time when soap was a luxury, baths were a rare indulgence, and the dusty streets of frontier towns held more secrets and smells than you might want to imagine. You picture it, the wooden sidewalks creaking under your boots, the sun baking down on the clapboard buildings, and the faint tang of horses, unwashed bodies, and who knows what else drifting through the air. You can almost hear the jingle of spurs and the whinny of a restless mare tied up outside the saloon. The Wild West was romanticized in dime novels and cowboy ballads, but the truth, hygiene was an afterthought. And if you were dropped into that world, you probably wouldn't survive your first week without catching something nasty. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know where you are in the world and what time it is as you're listening. Drop it in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year might be 1873, and you're stepping off a stagecoach after days of travel. Dust coats your clothes, your hair, your teeth. The stage driver hasn't washed in weeks, and neither have you. The moment your boots hit the ground, your senses are assaulted by the combined odor of animals' sweat and waste, some of it human. You glance around. The street is lined with buildings whose wooden walls are splattered with mud from recent rains. A few feet away, a horse lifts its tail, and you quickly look away. This is your welcome to the Wild West. Your first instinct might be to find a place to wash up, but here washing up means splashing your face and hands in a basin of water that's been used by half a dozen people before you. Soap, if it's even there, is a harsh lye-based brick that leaves your skin red and stinging. There's no running water, just barrels and buckets refilled from the nearest well or river. The thought of a warm bath is a fantasy reserved for the wealthy or the lucky few staying at a hotel in a bigger town. As you walk down the street, you notice that people here have a sort of tolerance for grime. Clothes are worn until they're stiff with sweat and dirt. Hair shines, but not from cleanliness, more from the natural oils that have built up over weeks. You might spot a barber's pole spinning lazily in the sun, promising shaves and haircuts. But even there, hygiene is questionable. The barber's tools are rinsed in water that's been sitting out all day, and razors might carry the nicks and rust of constant use. Meals are no cleaner. If you step into a saloon for a drink or a plate of beans, you'll be handed a tin cup that's been swirled in a bucket of cloudy water before being set in front of you. The bartender pours whiskey from a bottle that's been handled by dozens of grubby hands. In the kitchen, meat is stored without refrigeration, and flies are just part of the decor. You eat because you're hungry, not because you trust the food. And then there's the street itself. Horses are everywhere, and so is their waste. It gets trampled into the dirt ground, into dust that swirls with every gust of wind. On dry days, you breathe it in without thinking. On wet days, it becomes a thick mud that clings to your boots. Somewhere nearby, a wooden outhouse sits behind the saloon, its pit dug deep but far from odorless. If you're unlucky, you'll have to use it at night holding a lantern and trying not to think about what might be crawling around in there. But you adapt. The smells, the dirt, the lack of privacy, they become part of the background. Your world shrinks to the essentials: staying fed, staying alive, and avoiding sickness. You might share a room with strangers, sleeping in your clothes to keep warm and protect yourself from bed bugs. In the mornings, you shake the dust from your hat and step back into the sun, ready for another day, in a place where hygiene isn't a priority, it's a luxury. You might be wondering, how did anyone stay healthy in conditions like these? The truth is, many didn't. Illness swept through towns quickly, and without proper sanitation, infections were common. People relied on home remedies, superstition, and the occasional traveling doctor who might do more harm than good. But out here, survival was a daily act, and you learned to live with the constant presence of dirt disease and discomfort. Still, there's a strange charm to it, isn't there? The grit, the resilience, the way people carved out lives despite the hardships. And as you settle into this dusty world, you start to see it not just as a place of danger, but as one of stubborn endurance. You keep walking, the crunch of grit under your boots, blending with the low murmur of voices drifting from the saloon's swinging doors. The air is heavy with the scent of tobacco smoke, horse leather, and something faintly sour like old milk left too long in the sun. You notice the people passing by, a ranch hand with a bandana pulled up over his mouth to block the dust, a woman in a faded calico dress clutching a basket, a pair of gamblers in waistcoats whose collars are darkened from weeks without laundering. Everyone wears the same faint glaze of dust and sweat, as if it's a badge of belonging. Here the idea of clean is different from what you're used to. Back in your century, a hot shower is just a twist of a knob away. In the Wild West, water has to be hauled, heated, and rationed. A full bath means filling a tub with buckets of water carried from a pump or river, heated over a fire, then poured in an exhausting effort for something most folks consider a luxury. That's why in many towns, a bathhouse does brisk business. For a few coins, you can soak in a wooden tub in a small, steamy room, maybe even with soap and a towel provided. But be warned, you're not the first to use that water, and the faint ring around the tub tells you it's been shared more than once today. The bathhouse keeper might give you a choice: clean water for a higher price or cheaper rates if you don't mind following someone else's soak. And after a long cattle drive or dusty trek, even murky water can feel heavenly. You lower yourself and feeling the grit dissolve from your skin, the aches in your muscles loosening. Still, you know that once you step back outside, the dust will find you again within minutes. If you're staying in a boarding house, hygiene is whatever the landlady can manage. Sheets are seldom changed, and beds are shared in shifts. One traveler leaves, another takes their place. The pillow might still be warm from the last sleeper's head. Lice, fleas, and bed bugs are constant companions, and you learn to live with the occasional itch. Some people sprinkle their bedding with kerosene to kill the pests, ignoring the danger of sleeping near open flames. Others simply sleep in their clothes, hoping the extra layers will make it harder for the bugs to find skin. And then there's the matter of teeth. Toothbrushes exist, but not everyone owns one, and toothpaste is still a luxury. People might clean their teeth with twigs, cloth, or a dab of baking soda if they can get it. Dental care is more about endurance than prevention. You keep a tooth until it hurts too much, and then you find someone, maybe even the town blacksmith, to pull it. A dentist, if there is one, works without anesthesia. You sit in a chair, grip the arms, and try not to scream as the forceps close around the tooth. The same casual approach applies to clothing. You might have one good outfit for Sundays or special occasions and a work outfit you wear day after day. Washing clothes means scrubbing them by hand in a tub, wringing them out, and hanging them to dry, work that takes hours. In smaller settlements, it's easier to just wear your clothes until they're too dirty to stand, then beat the dust out and keep going. Laundry days are rare, and soap is reserved for the worst stains. As you wander toward the edge of town, you pass the livery stable. The smell here is enough to turn your stomach. Horse manure piled high in the back, urine soaking into the straw, flies buzzing in thick clouds. The stable hands work with bare hands, their fingernails rimmed with black, their clothes stained beyond saving. You realize that everyone here carries the scent of their work, the miner smells of sweat and earth, the cattleman of leather and dust, the blacksmith of soot and scorched metal. And yet, despite the grime, life hums along. People gather at the general store, where barrels of flour sit open to the air, sometimes shared with mice. They greet each other in the street, their faces weathered and lined from the sun. No one seems to mind the smells or the dirt they've long since stopped noticing. The Wild West isn't a place for polished manners or crisp linen. It's a place where you endure and the dust becomes part of you. That night you find yourself in a small rented room above the saloon. The thin walls let in the muffled laughter and piano music below. Your bed creaks when you sit on it, and you feel the faint movement of something small scurrying away under the mattress. You lie down fully dressed, hat over your eyes, boots still on. Outside, a gust of wind rattles the shutters, bringing with it the familiar scent of dust and horses. You realize this is the cleanest you're going to feel all week. Morning comes with a pale strip of light slipping through the warped shutters and the sound of boots thumping on the wooden floorboards outside your door. Somewhere below, a cowhand coughs hard enough to shake the walls, followed by the clink of glasses and the faint smell of last night's whiskey still hanging in the air. You sit up, your shirt stiff where sweat dried overnight, your mouth dry with that sour taste that comes from sleeping in a cloud of stale tobacco and dust. In the Wild West, you don't wake up feeling refreshed. You wake up feeling like you've survived something. You step outside onto the narrow balcony, the morning air cool, but still carrying that undertone of animals and unwashed bodies. Down in the street, men are already moving cattle through town, their shouts mingling with the lowing of the herd. The dust they kick up hangs in the air, like a veil catching the light in a golden haze. You think about splashing your face, maybe even finding a bathhouse, but then you remember today's water has to be hauled. And if the barrels aren't full yet, you might be last in line. You wander toward the pump behind the saloon, where a few early risers are filling buckets. The pump handle creaks, the water coming up cold from underground, clear for the moment before it's poured into a shared basin. You bend down, cup your hands, and splash your face. The cold shocks you awake, but the relief is short-lived. Within minutes, the dust will settle on your skin again. Beside you, a man is rinsing out his mouth and spitting into the dirt. That's the whole morning wash for most folks here. And yet, there's a kind of rhythm to it. Everyone's in the same situation, so no one stares if your collar is wilted or your hair looks greasy. Cleanliness is judged by effort more than results. A person who smells faintly of lye soap is practically refined. The smell of sweat is universal. The smell of sickness is what people fear. Out here, hygiene isn't about looking fresh. It's about avoiding the kind of filth that brings disease. You cross over to the main street where shopkeepers are sweeping their wooden porches. The sweepings don't go far, just down into the gutter, where horse droppings, food scraps, and who knows what collect, until the next rainstorm carries them away. Flies buzz in lazy circles, landing on everything. The butcher's shop has a half-slaughtered calf hanging in the window. No ice in sight, just a sheet of canvas draped to keep off the sun. You wonder how anyone survives eating meat that's been hanging there since yesterday. At the end of the street, you spot a small tent. Today's traveling dentist has arrived. A sign painted in uneven letters promises extractions, fillings, false teeth affordable. You watch as a ranch hand emerges holding his jaw, a dark stain spreading on the front of his shirt. The tools are laid out on a table for all to see, pliers, files, and a saw. There's no privacy, no anesthesia, and no disinfectant. Between patients, the instruments are wiped on a rag. You turn away quickly, glad you have no toothache. Yet, the women in town face their own hygiene battles. Dresses trail in the dust, hems soaking up mud and manure. Petticoats and stockings hold heat and sweat close to the skin. Underthings are washed when possible, but soap is harsh and water is precious. Hair washing is a rare treat done with rainwater when it can be collected. More often, hair is brushed and braided to hide the grease, sprinkled with powder, if there's any to spare. For women working in kitchens or laundries, burns, cracked hands, and grime under the nails are simply part of life. By midday, the heat drives you toward shade. You duck into the saloon where the dimness hides much of the dust, but not the smell, a thick mix of beer sweat and wood smoke. You take a seat at a table, running your fingers over the rough surface. It's sticky from countless spills, wiped only with a damp rag now and then. The bartender pours you a drink using the same tin cup you saw him hand to a gambler earlier. No one here worries about germs. They worry about running out of whiskey. In the corner, a group of cowhands is talking about the last cattle drive, how they went weeks without bathing, sleeping on the ground, clothes crusted with sweat and dust. One of them laughs, saying the smell kept the coyotes away. You can't tell if he's joking. But you do know that after enough days in the West, your own sense of smell adjusts. You stop noticing the constant background odors until you leave town and come back. Then it hits you fresh like a slap. Later you step outside again, the sun now high and merciless. You catch your reflection in a store window, hat pulled low, eyes squinting, a fine layer of dust on your cheeks and neck. You look like you belong here now, and maybe in a strange way you do. You've stopped expecting clean hands and polished boots. You've started measuring the day, not by how fresh you feel, but by how much grit you've managed to keep out of your teeth. The afternoon heat presses down like a heavy blanket, turning the dusty street into a shimmering ribbon. You find yourself walking slower, drawn toward the edges of town, where the smell shifts from wood smoke and horses to something sharper, human waste. Out here, sewage system is a phrase nobody's ever heard. Wastewater from kitchens and wash basins is tossed straight into the street. Chamber pots are emptied out back or down an alley, and the outhouse pits fill slowly, ripening under the sun. You follow the smell to a row of weathered sheds, each with a door hanging crooked on its hinges. These are the privies shared by anyone who needs them. Inside, it's dark, cramped, and buzzing with flies. The pit below is deep, but the stench rises up like a living thing. There's no paper, maybe a stack of old newspaper or a scrap of catalog if you're lucky. Some folks carry their own rag washed when they can, though washed often just means rinsed in a bucket. You take a breath and step back out into the light, grateful for the breeze, even if it carries dust with it. In the larger towns, public health boards will someday post rules about outhouse placement. But right now, people build them where it's convenient. That means they're often too close to wells, which is how disease spreads quietly through the water supply. Typhoid, dysentery, cholera. They don't care how tough you are. Out here, a bad case of camp fever can take you down faster than a bullet. But for now, nobody talks about germs. They talk about bad luck. You wander past the blacksmith shop where a man is hammering a glowing horseshoe on his anvil. Sparks fly the air thick with the smell of scorched iron and sweat. His shirt is blackened from smoke, his arms streaked with soot. and you realize he's working in the same clothes he'll wear to supper. That's just the way it is. Clothes last longer if you don't wash them too often. And when you do, you scrub them in cold water with lye soap that eats at the fibers and at your skin. The same logic applies to boots. Out here, leather is precious and water is its enemy. A good pair of boots might be worn for years without ever touching soapy water. Instead, they're brushed, scraped, and left to air out. If they smell well, so does everything else. By now, your own boots carry the day's dust, the faint imprint of manure, and maybe a splash of beer from the saloon floor. They're part of the story you're wearing. Down by the river, a few women are washing clothes on flat rocks, slapping the fabric against the stone to loosen the dirt. The water runs brown where they work, but they keep going, sleeves rolled up, skirts tucked high enough to keep them dry. There's laughter too. The work is backbreaking, but it's also social. News travels here as quickly as the current, carried in quiet voices and knowing glances. You can tell who's behind on their laundry by the thickness of the dust on their clothes, but no one judges. They know the weight of the chore. Sometimes you hear of bath nights in certain households. Everyone takes turns using the same tub of water. The father first, then the mother, then the children in order of age. By the time the youngest climbs in the water, is cloudy, tepid, and slick. It's a ritual, not a luxury, and it only happens once a week at most. In between, people wash up at the basin, splashing just enough to get the worst of the dirt off their hands and face. As the sun dips lower, you pass by the doctor's office. The door is propped open, and inside you see shelves lined with jars, herbs, powders, glass bottles filled with amber liquid. The doctor himself wears a vest with stains whose origins you'd rather not guess. His instruments sit on a table, gleaming faintly in the fading light. He doesn't wash them between uses, only wipes them on a cloth. Patients wait on wooden chairs, holding rags to wounds, coughing into their hands. Here, medical care is as rough as the rest of life, and survival is as much about luck as skill. You pause, realizing that hygiene here is less about cleanliness and more about management, managing the smells, the pests, the diseases, just enough to keep going. People have learned to live with discomfort because there's no other choice. You start to see the unspoken rules: don't waste water, don't draw attention to someone else's filth, and accept that the dust will always win. As evening settles, lanterns flicker to life along the street. The shadows soften, the air cools, and for a moment the smells fade into the background. You sit on the edge of the boardwalk, feeling the grit under your fingertips, watching the last light fade from the sky. You've been in the Wild West long enough now to know you can't fight the dirt. You can only make peace with it. Night in the Wild West carries its own brand of grit. The heat of the day gives way to a sharper chill, but the air still clings to you, thick with smoke from the saloon lamps, the tang of burning kerosene and the faint metallic scent of dust settling after a long day of boots and hooves kicking it skyward. You walk the main street under a moon that hangs low and pale, casting silver over the rooftops. The sounds have shifted. The clatter of wagon wheels is gone, replaced by muffled laughter, a fiddle scraping in some back room, and the occasional distant bark of a dog. You notice how quickly darkness hides the grime. The warped boardwalks and dirt-smeared walls look almost picturesque under lamplight, their flaws softened to shadows. But the smells remain. Passing the livery stable, you catch the sharp sting of manure mixing with the sweetness of hay. Somewhere nearby, an outhouse door creaks on its hinges, and you hear the hollow thud of a chamber pot being emptied into the alley. No one thinks twice about it. Waste is part of the nightly routine. Inside the saloon, you find the room fuller than it was at midday. Men crowd the bar, their hats pushed back, faces flushed from drink. The tables are busy with card games, each one a patchwork of boots, spurs, and elbows. The air is warm and damp from so many bodies in close quarters. Sweat gleams on foreheads, trickles down necks. The floor under your boots is sticky, though no one seems to notice. You realize that in a place like this, senses are selective. You stop registering what's unpleasant if you want to enjoy yourself at all. You claim a spot at the far wall, watching the swirl of movement. A serving girl navigates between tables, balancing mugs of beer that slosh over the rims. Her apron is stained from spills, her hair pulled back loosely, a few strands stuck to her temples. She wears the fatigue of someone who's been on her feet since sunrise, and you know she won't wash up until the night is over, if at all. She sets a mug in front of you with a tired smile, and you take it without asking when it was last rinsed. That's just the way things are here. The conversation nearby turns to the trail. A group of cattle drovers talk about months spent on the open range, how the smell of sweat leather and campfire smoke becomes a second skin, and how bathing is done in rivers that are just as muddy as the men themselves. They laugh about how after a few weeks, no one can tell who smells worse, the cowhands, the horses, or the bedrolls they share. Out here, humor is the best way to handle discomfort. Later, you step outside for air, though fresh is a relative term. The street is quieter now, lanterns glowing in the windows of boarding houses. The cool night air carries the mixed perfume of tobacco pine from the surrounding hills, and the faint rot of refuse piles left to be picked over by stray dogs. A breeze stirs the dust brushing against your face like dry paper. You feel it settling in your hair, along the rim of your hat, as if even the night can't leave you clean. You wander toward the outskirts where houses thin out and the darkness grows deeper. Here, the smell of the open earth overtakes the man-made odors. You can hear the soft rush of the river nearby, and for a moment you think of washing. But then you remember at night the riverbank belongs to creatures you can't see in the dark. Coyotes, snakes, maybe even the occasional mountain lion. Water isn't just precious, it's dangerous after sundown. Back in town, you pass the bathhouse. Its windows are steamed over, glowing faintly from the lamps inside. You hear splashes, low voices, the creak of wooden tubs. A sign on the door says, "Clean Water Extra." You imagine the relief of sinking into that heat, letting the day's dust slide away. But you also imagine the person who was in that water before you. It's a gamble like everything else here. Finally, you return to your small rented room. The air inside is warmer than the street, thick with the scent of wood and old fabric. You pull off your boots but keep the rest of your clothes on. Experience has taught you that sleeping in your underclothes invites every pest in the mattress to feast. You lie back, feeling the rough texture of the blanket under your palms, and let your eyes adjust to the darkness. Somewhere below the saloon, piano plays a slow, drifting tune. And as you drift with it, you realize that this is life in the Wild West, close, dusty, and far from clean, yet somehow still alive with a raw, unpolished charm. Dawn in the Wild West doesn't arrive quietly. It creeps in through the thin walls, riding on the sounds of roosters, clanging pots, and the shuffle of boots heading toward the street. You wake to the musty smell of the blanket clinging to you, mixed with the sharper tang of unwashed wool from your coat hanging nearby. Your mouth is dry, your throat scratchy, and your tongue feels like it's been coated in a thin layer of dust. That's because you've been breathing in fine grit all night. You swing your legs over the side of the bed, the floorboards cold under your feet, even through your socks. A scurrying sound makes you pause, just a mouse darting into a crack in the wall, probably on its way to the crumbs you left last night. In a place like this, sharing space with vermin is a given. You don't dwell on it. Instead, you grab your hat, your boots, and head for the street before the bathwater in the pump basin gets too murky. Outside, the air is crisp, the sunlight already picking up the gold in the drifting dust. A few townsfolk are gathered at the communal pump, some with buckets, others with just their hands cupped. The water is shockingly cold, biting at your skin as you splash your face. There's no soap in sight, only the occasional sliver someone carries in their pocket for emergencies. You think about brushing your teeth, but that's a rare luxury here. Some chew on a twig to scrub their molars. Others swish with whiskey or just let it go. The sourness in the morning air isn't just the stables, it's people's breath mingling in the stillness. You follow the smell of baking bread to the boarding house kitchen. Breakfast here isn't fancy, just coffee so strong it could peel paint bread, maybe some salt pork if the cook's in a generous mood. You sit at a long wooden table, its surface permanently tacky from years of spills. Around you, men and women eat in silence, their hands bearing the ground-in grime of yesterday's work. No one washes before a meal unless they've been handling something foul, and even then, a quick rinse is all they bother with. Stepping back into the street, you head toward the general store. The door swings inward, and you're greeted by the mingled scents of flour kerosene leather and salted meat. The barrels of beans and sugar are uncovered, and a mouse leaps away as the storekeeper lifts a scoop. Hygiene here is a negotiation. Everyone knows the food has been touched by more than human hands, but no one talks about it. You buy a few strips of jerky that have been hanging in the window for who knows how long, brush the dust off, and chew slowly. Further down, you pass the blacksmith again. His shirt is darker than it was yesterday, the sweat and soot building in layers. He works barehanded, gripping hot metal, with thick leather gloves, never thinking about how black the water will run when he finally washes. It strikes you how much of life here depends on an unspoken tolerance for filth. If you complained every time you got dirty, you'd never get anything done. On the edge of town, you find the river. Women are kneeling on the banks, scrubbing clothes in the cold water. They use soap sparingly. It's expensive and harsh, so most of the cleaning comes from the force of the slap against the rocks. Their skirts trail in the shallows, picking up mud even as they work. A child splashes nearby, laughing, his face streaked with dirt that will be there until bedtime. You realize that here, clean is a moment, not a state. You're clean until the next gust of wind, the next step into the street, the next chore. The sun climbs higher, and so does the dust. You pull your bandana over your mouth, feeling the rough cloth scrape your skin. Around you, everyone has their own way of coping. Some wear wide-brimmed hats to keep the dust out of their eyes. Others just squint through it. No one talks about germs. They talk about grit, about the taste of the wind, about whether the air is thick today. And you begin to understand that hygiene here isn't about eliminating dirt. It's about enduring it. By midday, the town hums with activity again. Horses stamp their hooves, wagons creak under loads of supplies, and the saloon doors swing endlessly. The smells mingle into a single heady perfume of dust, sweat, leather, and smoke. It's the smell of the Wild West, harsh, unrelenting, and oddly comforting once you've accepted it. You breathe it in, realizing that somewhere along the way you stopped trying to hold your breath. By the time the afternoon sun leans westward, you've stopped thinking about the dust as something foreign. It's simply part of your skin now. You find yourself walking the long way around town down alleys, where the reality of Wild West hygiene shows itself most plainly. These narrow gaps between buildings are lined with barrels for rainwater collection, though half of them are dry. The others hold water the color of weak tea, with leaves dead insects and the occasional floating feather. People use it anyway for washing hands, rinsing clothes, even cooking if the well's gone low. Out here, you can't afford to be squeamish. A few doors down, a woman is shaking out a rug over the street. A fine mist of dust billows into the air, sparkling briefly before drifting into your hair and eyes. You blink, but there's no escaping it. It's the same dust that's been passing from boots to walls to lungs since the town was built. Laundry lines crisscross the alley above your head shirts and underclothes flapping in the hot breeze. They look clean from a distance, but you know they were washed in the same river water where cattle drink upstream. Turning onto the main street again, you stop outside the barber's shop. Through the window, you see a man in the chair, his head tilted back, as the barber runs a straight razor along his jaw. The blade glints in the sunlight, but you've watched enough to know it hasn't been boiled or even wiped with alcohol. The brush used to lather his face is damp and dark at the base, probably hasn't been fully dry in weeks. You wonder how many faces it's touched. Yet the man looks relaxed, even closing his eyes as if the scrape of the blade is the closest thing to luxury he'll get this month. A little farther on, you pass a group of children playing marbles in the dirt. Their hands are blackened fingernails caked with soil, but they're too busy laughing to care. One boy sneezes, wipes his nose with the back of his sleeve, and keeps playing. You know that if a cold or worse passes through town, it will move fast. No one here has the habit of covering coughs or washing hands after sneezing. Illness doesn't just linger. It thrives in the closeness and the dust. You step into the general store again for a look at supplies. In a wooden crate near the door, bars of soap sit stacked like bricks, their rough surfaces flecked with white crystals from the lye. You pick one up, feel the grit in it, and imagine how it would strip the oil from your skin. Next to it is a tin of tooth powder, chalky and coarse-flavored, faintly with mint if you're lucky, but more often tasting of baking soda. A single toothbrush hangs on a peg, its bristles splayed, its handle worn smooth from years of use. It's not for sale, it's the shopkeeper's own, and he keeps it there to remind himself to use it when he thinks of it. Outside again, the sun has begun its slow descent, casting the town in gold and shadow. A wagon rolls past its wheels, churning up clouds of dirt that stick to the sweat on your neck. A man walking behind it spits into the street, the glob landing with a faint dark splash before being ground in by the next set of boots. It's the kind of small, constant addition to the landscape that you no longer even blink at. You decide to walk toward the edge of town where the stockyards sit. The smell hits you before you arrive, thick, warm, and layered with months of unwashed animals and the piles they've left behind. Men move among the pens, slapping the flanks of restless cattle, their own shirts stiff with dried sweat. Flies gather in black clouds so dense you can hear their hum. The men wave them away half-heartedly, too accustomed to bother with real effort. Out here, flies are simply part of breathing. As the day edges toward evening, You realize something the Wild West never gives you: a moment when you feel completely clean. You can scrub until your skin is raw, rinse until the water runs clear, and still the dust finds you. It clings to your clothes, hides in the creases of your hands, works into the lines of your face. But instead of resisting it, you've begun to wear it like everyone else, less as a nuisance and more as proof that you're surviving in this rough, relentless place. The sun dips low, throwing long shadows across the street, and the air cools just enough to coax people back outside. Lamps are being lit one by one, each little flame trembling against the evening breeze. You find yourself drawn toward the heart of town, where the sounds of the day give way to the murmurs of night. A piano tumbles out a jaunty tune from the saloon, its notes drifting over the clink of glasses and bursts of laughter. But beneath it all is the steady undercurrent of smells: wood smoke, sweat, manure, and the faint sourness of beer-soaked floors. You pause outside the saloon and lean on the post, watching the steady stream of customers. Every person who walks in carries the same Wild West perfume, part dust, part animal part, the lingering scent of whatever work they've done that day. And you know that once they're inside, that smell will blend into the air so thickly that after a few minutes, no one will notice it anymore. The human nose can only keep protesting for so long before it gives up. Stepping inside, you see the tables are busy, most of them covered in half-played card games and drinks in various stages of being finished. The wood under your boots feels tacky again, just like last night, and you realize it's never really cleaned, just wiped enough so the surface isn't visibly slick. A serving girl brushes past you, her sleeve catching on your arm, leaving a faint trace of soap and sweat. You wonder when she last bathed. Then you stop yourself, because wondering is pointless. The answer is the same for nearly everyone here: not recently. At the bar, a man downs a shot and slams the glass down. The barkeep grabs it, gives it a quick swirl in a bucket of cloudy water, and hands it off to the next customer. There's no pretense of clean, only less dirty, and the patrons don't seem to mind. They're here for whiskey, not sanitation. In fact, some even claim the whiskey kills whatever germs linger. Whether that's true or just an excuse, you can't say, but the belief is strong enough that nobody argues. You step back out into the cooler night air, and the contrast is sharp: the saloon's heavy dampness replaced by the open scent of dust and smoke. The street has quieted except for a few late wagons rumbling past their wheels, sending little spirals of grit into the lamplight. Somewhere down the block, you hear the splash of water in a basin, a woman washing her face on her porch, lit only by a small lantern. She pours the water out into the street when she's done, where it mingles instantly with the dirt. You make your way toward the boarding house, passing a small group of men sitting outside on crates, talking low. The glow from their cigarettes briefly illuminates their faces, creases deepened by sun and wind, the faint sheen of skin that hasn't felt soap in days. One of them spits into the dust and keeps talking, his voice slow and easy, as if the night itself moves on his schedule. Near the edge of town, you catch sight of the bathhouse again. This late, it's quieter, only one dim light inside. Through the open window, you hear the slosh of water as someone shifts in a wooden tub. You imagine the steam rising in that small room, mingling with the scent of lye soap and sweat. Maybe the water is cleaner at night, maybe not. Either way, it's a fleeting kind of clean. By morning, the dust will find its way back. You finally reach your room and push the door closed behind you. The air inside is still holding the smell of old timber and the faint must of fabric that's been stored too long. You remove your hat, feeling the imprint of its band across your forehead. Dust sifts down as you set it on the table. You loosen your bandana and notice how the skin beneath feels slightly cleaner than the rest of your face. It's a small reminder that even here in a place where dirt wins every time, there are little tricks to keeping some part of yourself untouched. You lie down fully clothed again, the mattress creaking under you, and close your eyes. Outside, the last murmurs of the street fade into the hum of night insects. The day's grime stays with you, but somehow you're beginning to accept it not as a burden, but as part of the fabric of the Wild West itself. Morning drags you out of sleep with the smell of strong coffee drifting up from the boarding house kitchen, mixed with the dry, almost metallic scent of the dust settling overnight. You open your eyes to find your boots exactly where you left them, coated in a faint new layer of grit, as if the dust crept in on silent feet while you slept. Your shirt is still wrinkled from the day before, and when you run a hand through your hair, you can feel the stiffness of dried sweat holding it in place. Stepping outside, the air is cooler than you expect, almost crisp, though you know it won't last. The first light catches the tops of the buildings, revealing every streak of dirt and smudge of weather on their clapboard walls. Out by the pump, a few early risers are already drawing water, and you join them. The handle groans, water splashes into a dented bucket, and you cup your hands to drink. It's not cold enough to be refreshing, and you can taste the faint mineral bite that tells you the well hasn't been cleaned in years. Still, it clears the dust from your throat for now. Breakfast is a repeat of yesterday bred coffee, maybe a slice of bacon if the cook's feeling generous. The bacon is salty, chewy, and tastes faintly of the pan it's been fried in for years without a thorough scrubbing. In this place, seasoned cookware means a layer of old grease that never quite comes off. The plates are chipped enamel, the mugs dented tin, and though they've been rinsed, you can still feel the faint roughness where food once stuck. You head toward the main street where the day's business is starting. A wagon load of supplies is being unloaded in front of the general store, and you notice the barrels marked flour are already dusted with a thin film of horsehair and dirt from the trip. The storekeeper doesn't bother brushing it off. It'll be sifted out when the bread's baked. He shrugs at you as if to say, "That's just how it is." And you understand now out here the perfect is the enemy of the possible. Further along, you hear the rhythmic ring of the blacksmith's hammer. The man's face glistens in the heat, his shirt damp with sweat, but he works without pause. His apron is black with soot, and when he wipes his brow with his forearm, the streak it leaves behind blends with the grime already there. You think of how many people in town will handle the things he makes. Horseshoes, nails, tools, without ever wondering about the hands that shaped them. Near the livery, a man is mucking out the stalls, shoveling manure into a cart. The smell hits you before you even see him, a sharp, ammonia-heavy tang that makes your eyes water. Flies swarm thick around him, landing on his back, his hands, his face. He doesn't flinch. The cart will be wheeled out beyond the edge of town and dumped into a growing pile that the wind will carry back bit by bit. You decide to walk toward the outskirts, where the land flattens into dusty pasture. A few houses sit here, each with its own patch of bare earth, and a small outhouse in back. Clothes hang from lines strung between posts, shirts stiff from drying in the sun. In the yard of one house, a woman is washing her baby in a small tin tub, the water already turning gray. She works quickly, aware that the breeze will chill the child the moment he's lifted out. The baby's laughter carries over the dry grass, a small sound of comfort in a place where comfort is scarce. On the way back into town, you pass a group of men digging a new well. The dirt they pull up smells faintly of rot, and you realize the water table here carries everything that seeps into the ground, waste from outhouses, refuse from kitchens, even the runoff from the stockyards. It's no wonder sickness moves so fast when it comes. Yet no one talks about boiling water. Fuel is too precious for that kind of luxury. By midday, the dust is swirling again, settling into the creases of your shirt and the corners of your eyes. You don't even bother wiping it away. Instead, you push your hat lower against the glare and keep walking. You've learned that here you can fight the dirt all you want, but you'll never win. The only victory is lasting another day in it. The afternoon sun in the Wild West has a way of flattening everything. The sounds, the colors, even the will to move quickly. Heat shimmers above the dirt road, and the shadows of horses and wagons stretch long and thin. You step off the boardwalk to let a freight wagon pass its wheels, grinding up dust that rolls over you like smoke. It settles on your shoulders, in your hair, and between your teeth before you can spit it out. The driver gives you a nod, the brim of his hat casting a shadow over his sunburned face, and you know, from his cracked lips and dust-caked shirt, that he's been on the trail for days without a proper wash. Past the livery, you hear the rattle of tin cups and the low murmur of voices coming from the feed store's side porch. A few men are taking their midday break sitting on sacks of grain, with their boots off, airing out socks that could stand upright on their own. The smell is a pungent mix of leather sweat and the faint sourness of skin that's been trapped too long in damp wool. They joke about it, holding their noses in mock disgust, but none of them bothers to actually wash their feet. It's too much trouble for something that will be dirty again before sundown. You keep walking until you reach the corner where the bathhouse stands, the sign out front advertising Hot Water 25C Soap Extra. The door swings open and a man steps out, steam clinging to his clothes, his hair slicked back with water still dripping down his neck. He looks almost reborn, though you know the freshness will last only until the next gust of wind coats him in trail dust again. Inside you can hear the creak of wooden tubs and the quiet splash of water, but also the muffled voices of those negotiating for cleaner water, an extra dime to be the first bather instead of the third. Across the street, a group of women are gathered at the boarding house porch, peeling potatoes into a bucket. The skins fall into the dust at their feet, where chickens peck around without concern. The women's aprons are streaked with dirt, their sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms reddened by lye soap and hot water from scrubbing laundry earlier. They pause now and then to push hair back from their faces, leaving faint smudges on their cheeks from their own hands. The smell of the street changes as you pass the butcher's shop. The door is propped open, letting in a few stray flies and letting out the thick, metallic scent of raw meat. Sides of beef hang on hooks, their surfaces darkened at the edges, where the air has begun to dry them. Sawdust is scattered on the floor to soak up whatever drips, but it's not fresh. You can see darker patches where the blood has seeped through before. Customers stand in line unconcerned, chatting about the weather, while the butcher wipes his hands on an apron that's seen weeks of use. Further on, the doctor's office sits in a narrow building with faded green shutters. Through the open window, you see him leaning over a patient, wrapping a bandage around a hand. The bandage looks clean enough, but the table beneath it bears the marks of many other injuries, scratches, stains, and the faint smell of old antiseptic that's not quite strong enough to mask everything else. His instruments lie in a tin tray nearby, and though they catch the sunlight, you know they haven't been boiled. They're wiped down between uses, but out here, that's the best anyone can expect. As the heat begins to ease, the street grows busier again. Children chase each other along the boardwalk, their laughter carrying above the creak of wagon wheels. Their clothes are patched but dusty, their bare feet leaving faint prints in the powdery dirt. One little girl trips, skins her knee, and jumps up without a cry, brushing herself off with hands that are already coated in grime. No one rushes to clean the scrape. It'll be fine, they say, as long as it doesn't fester. Out here, the threshold for concern is much higher than you're used to. By the time the sun leans toward the horizon, you've walked nearly the whole length of town and back. Every smell, every sound, every grain of dust feels familiar now, as if it's woven into your clothes and skin. You pass the saloon where men are gathering for the evening, and catch a whiff of the stale beer from last night's spills mixing with the sharp scent of fresh whiskey. It's not pleasant exactly, but it's honest, just like everything else in this place. Evening creeps in, slowly painting the town in layers of amber and shadow. The heat still lingers on the boards under your boots, but the air feels looser now, easier to breathe. People drift into the street as if drawn by the cooler light, men in work shirts with the sleeves rolled high, women in long skirts lifting the hems just enough to step over the gutter. You watch as a mother guides her two children toward the pump, each clutching a dented tin cup. They take turns filling them, sipping the warm water without complaint, then pouring what's left over their hands. It's not enough to wash properly, but it's a gesture, one of those small evening rituals that makes the day feel done. You walk past the pump and toward the saloon, where the glow from the windows spills into the dust like liquid gold. Inside, the air is already thick with the mingled scents of whiskey, tobacco, and bodies pressed close. A piano player works at a tune in the corner, his hands black at the knuckles from the same dust that clings to the keys. You claim a space near the wall, the boards cool against your back, and let your eyes wander over the scene. Every man's shirt carries a day's worth of labor in its fabric, creases of sweat, smears of dirt, the faint shine of oil where hands have wiped across them. And no one here thinks less of it. In fact, the cleanest man in the room might be the one who hasn't done a lick of work all day. A serving girl passes by with a tray, weaving through the crowd like she's walking a familiar trail. Her hair is pinned up, but a few strands have come loose, sticking to the damp skin along her neck. When she leans in to set drinks on a table, you catch a whiff of lye soap under the dust-proof she bathed sometime in the last day or two. Here, that's as close as anyone gets to smelling fresh. You step outside after a while, letting the night air cool your face. The street has softened in the dark, the edges of every building blurred by shadow. Farther down, the butcher's shop is closed tight, but the smell of the day's work still lingers faintly in the air, as if the walls have soaked it in. Across from it, a man sits on a barrel whittling a piece of wood by lantern light. The shavings collect at his feet, mixing with the dirt and whatever else has been dropped there over the weeks. At the edge of town, the outhouses stand in a silent row. You pass them on your way toward the open ground, beyond where the air smells more of dry grass and less of people. The stars are sharp above you, cold and endless, and for a moment, the grit on your skin feels like part of the landscape dust carried down from the hills, from trails trod by herds and wagons long before you arrived. You sit on a fence rail, listening to the distant shuffle of hooves and the low murmur of voices carrying from town. The Wild West at night has a rhythm all its own. It's not cleaner than the day, but it's quieter. The dust still clings, the smells still linger, but they seem muted under the blanket of darkness. You realize that here the night isn't about washing away the day, it's about accepting what you've carried through it. And tonight, as you make your way back to your room, you do so without trying to brush the dust from your coat or rinse the taste of the street from your mouth. You've learned that in this place, survival isn't about chasing clean. It's about learning to live in the in-between. The next morning, the first thing you notice isn't the light, it's the sound. Somewhere outside, someone is hammering the rhythmic thud carrying through the thin walls of your room. You sit up and smell the boarding house before you see it. A stew of coffee, bacon, grease, and the faint mustiness of old blankets that have never truly been aired out. Your mouth tastes of sleep and dust, and when you run your tongue over your teeth, you feel the familiar roughness of a night gone without brushing. Here, that's not a lapse, it's routine. You lace up your boots, noticing the fine layer of dirt that has already settled in the creases since yesterday. Outside, the street is still cool, though the sunlight is just starting to tip over the rooftops. People are already at work, one man sweeping his porch, raising little clouds that float lazily toward the street. Another carrying a sloshing bucket to dump somewhere out back. The outhouses are in steady use, their doors swinging open and shut as neighbors come and go, no one giving them a second glance. The smell mingles with the smoke from breakfast fires, an odd combination that you've grown used to, though you doubt you'll ever call it pleasant. You wander toward the pump for a quick wash. The handle is slick from use, and the water comes up slow, cloudy at first, before running clearer. You splash your face, feeling the grit rinse off in rivulets, but your hands never feel entirely clean. There's always that faint tackiness left behind. Around you, others do the same, some spitting into the dirt after rinsing their mouths. Others just splashing their necks before heading on with the day. Nobody lingers. Water is for necessity, not indulgence. Down at the general store, the morning delivery is underway. Sacks of flour and cornmeal are stacked near the door, each already wearing its own coating of dust. Inside, the air smells faintly of leather sugar and kerosene. The shelves are neat enough, but you notice the tins of lard have a thin film of grit on the lids. Even sealed goods here can't escape the dust. The shopkeeper wears the same shirt you saw him in yesterday, a pale stripe of salt at the collar where sweat has dried. You don't even think to judge him for it. Your own shirt feels the same. Farther along, the blacksmith's hammer is already ringing. His work apron is darker than ever, and you notice how the grime never fully leaves the deep cracks of his hands. It's not that he doesn't wash, it's that work here grinds itself into a person layer by layer. Across the street, a woman sits on a stool outside her doorway, mending a shirt that's been patched so many times you wonder if any of the original fabric is left. She works with steady hands, occasionally pausing to swat at flies. By midday, the heat is back, pressing down from above and rising up from the baked earth beneath your boots. The street is busier now, wagons clattering over ruts, horses stamping children, darting between buildings. Dust rises in lazy swirls, settling on every exposed surface. It gathers in your eyelashes, your nostrils, even the fold of your neck, where your collar gapes. And just when you think you might find a patch of shade to rest the smell of the stockyard rolls in a deep, sour wave that turns the air heavy. Yet you notice something else, the way no one flinches anymore. Not the shopkeeper who steps outside to sweep, not the mother shepherding her children home, not the men on the corner playing cards on a barrel top. This is their normal, the constant undercurrent of life here. You've stopped pulling out a cloth to wipe your face every hour. You've stopped brushing dust from your sleeves. You've started to move through it, like water letting it cling and then fall away as it pleases. By the time the sun begins to lean toward the horizon, you find yourself sitting on the boarding house steps, boots planted in the dirt, watching the day settle. Your hands rest on your knees, and they're not clean, but they're steady. You've begun to realize that here hygiene isn't about reaching some impossible standard. It's about making do with what you have and keeping enough strength for the next day. The evening breeze comes in slow brushing over the town, with just enough cool to lift the edge off the day's heat. You watch it stir the dust along the main street, carrying the faint sense of horses' wood smoke, and something sharper, the unmistakable tang from the outhouses behind the saloon. No one seems to notice. Folks are busy with the business of winding down, which here doesn't mean getting clean, it means gathering where the light is and the company's warm. You walk past the saloon, its swinging doors flapping, as a man steps out to spit into the street before heading back inside. The spit darkens the dust for a moment, before disappearing under someone's boot heel. It's the sort of thing that would make you flinch back home, but here it barely registers. The wooden floor inside is just as indifferent, layered with weeks of spills, tracked dirt, and the faint stick of old beer. Wiping it down isn't so much about sanitation as it is about preventing boots from slipping. Across the way, a few women sit outside a boarding house, their chairs tipped back against the wall. They're shelling peas into a tin bowl, chatting softly, their fingers working without pause. The hems of their skirts brush the dusty boards, and you know that later, when they hang those skirts for the night, they'll shake out the dirt without bothering to wash them. Washing is for when the grime becomes too heavy to shake free. You pass the bathhouse again, its sign swinging gently on rusty chains. Tonight the door is closed but not locked, and through the gap you can hear someone humming in the tub, the sound echoing in the small, steamy space. It's one of the rare times you catch a whiff of something cleaner than the air outside, a sharp note of lye soap edged with the mineral smell of heated water. You almost stop, but you keep walking, knowing how quickly that kind of clean fades here. At the far end of town, the butcher's shop is dark now, the day's work finished, but the scent of raw meat still hangs in the air, mixing with the earthy dampness from the gutter where the wastewater ran earlier. In the dim light, you see a stray dog nosing at the spot, licking at what's left behind. No one shoos it away here. Animals are part of the cleanup crew. The stockyards are quieter too, though the smell never really sleeps. You hear the slow shuffle of hooves, the occasional snort, the creak of wooden fencing settling in the night air. Men lean on the rails, talking in low voices, their shirts dark with the day's sweat. If there's a wash waiting for them at home, it's just a basin and a rag enough to knock the dust from their faces and maybe rinse their arms to the elbow. As you head back toward your room, the street feels almost peaceful. The lantern light softens everything, the grime, the peeling paint, the worn boards. In the shadows, you can almost pretend the west is cleaner than it is. But then a gust of wind sweeps through, carrying with it the familiar grit against your cheek. And you remember here dirt is the constant companion. You don't get rid of it. You learn to share the road with it. Morning arrives with the soft gray of first light spilling over the rooftops, but the stillness doesn't last long. Hooves clop against the packed dirt, wagon wheels creak, and somewhere a hammer starts its steady beat. You step outside into the cool air, only to feel the familiar grit settle against your face within minutes. It's not the kind of dust you can brush off. It's the kind that seems to melt into your skin, becoming part of you before the day has even begun. At the pump, a couple of ranch hands are taking turns with the handle, their boots planted wide in the dirt. They splash their faces and necks, water dripping dark circles into the ground, and then lean over to gulp straight from their cupped hands. The bucket sitting nearby is already clouded, but it doesn't stop them from dipping it back into the basin for another pour. Out here, the choice isn't between clean and dirty, it's between water and no water. You make your way to the general store where the morning delivery is stacked by the door. Flour sacks, crates of apples, and a few barrels of molasses, each dusted with the same fine powder that covers everything else. Inside, the air is a swirl of smells, leather, sugar, kerosene, and a faint must from the dried beans stored in the corner. The shopkeeper wipes his brow with the back of his sleeve, leaving a dark streak across his forehead, and greets you as if he hasn't noticed. Maybe he hasn't. Past the store, you hear the clang of the blacksmith's hammer. He's bent over the anvil, sweat already darkening his shirt in wide patches. His forearms are black with soot up to the elbow, the lines of his palms etched with grime. You realize his hands will never truly come clean, not with the water and soap they have here. The dirt is worked too deep, a permanent record of the trade. By midday, the heat presses down hard, and the smells of the town rise with it. The stockyard's musk drifts into the street, mingling with the tang of the outhouses. A woman hurries past with her skirts held high, revealing boots thick with dust. Behind her, a boy pushes a wheelbarrow piled with refuse toward the edge of town, where the garbage heap smolders under the sun. No one wears gloves, hands are bare, the skin thickened and used to rough work. You pass the saloon, and through the open door you catch sight of a game in progress. The table is crowded with players, their shirts wrinkled and stained hats tipped low. A serving girl sets down drinks, the mugs freshly cleaned in a bucket of gray water. The floor under the table is a scatter of peanut shells, cigar ends, and a slick patch of spilled beer. If someone slips, they'll just laugh it off. Here, mess isn't an interruption, it's part of the setting. Later, you wander toward the river. A few women are there, skirts tucked up, scrubbing clothes on the rocks. The soap makes the water film and swirl with suds, but the river carries it away quickly downstream to where cattle stand belly deep, flicking their tails against flies. The women talk as they work, passing stories as easily as they pass the washboard. Their hands are red and raw from the lye, but no one complains. This is just the cost of keeping clothes in some state between filthy and bearable. By the time the sun starts its slow drop, you've made your way back toward the boarding house. A man is sitting on the steps, picking at his nails with a small knife, sending curls of black grit into the street. He nods as you pass, and you realize that here no one apologizes for dirt on their skin, in their clothes, or under their nails. It's not shameful. It's proof of work, of survival, of being part of this place. And as you climb the stairs to your room, you find yourself thinking that maybe that's why the West has its own kind of beauty, not in spite of the dirt, but because of it. The last morning you spend in this town feels almost the same as the first, except now the sights, sounds, and smells no longer hit you like a wall. They wrap around you instead, familiar as the weight of your own coat. You step outside into the crisp air, watching the first rays of sun slide down the clapboard fronts of the buildings. The dust stirs under the hooves of an early rider, drifting up in lazy spirals that catch the light. You breathe it in without flinching. At the pump, a woman is filling a dented kettle, the handle wrapped in cloth to keep it from burning her hands when she sets it over the fire. The water is clear enough this morning, and she smiles faintly as she carries it off skirts, sweeping the dirt. Down the street, a pair of men haul in sacks of feed from a wagon. Their shirts are soaked at the shoulders, their hands dark with the grime of burlap and grain dust. They laugh at something one of them says, the sound cutting through the quiet, in a way that feels as much a part of the town as the dust itself. You decide to take one last slow walk, letting your boots find their own pace on the rutted road. The butcher's shop is already open, a fresh side of beef hanging in the window. Flies buzz around it, landing and lifting in a steady rhythm, unbothered by the shoeing hand of the butcher's boy. Across the street, the blacksmith wipes his brow and leaves a dark streak on his temple, then goes right back to the ringing rhythm of his hammer. You notice how the grit from his hands has settled into the deep lines of his face lines that even soap and scrubbing couldn't erase. The saloon is quiet for now, the air inside still heavy from last night's laughter and liquor. The floor is sticky under your boots, peanut shells crunching beneath each step. You can almost hear the echo of music, the shuffle of boots on the floorboards. A single cup sits on the bar, turned upside down to dry, a faint ring of yesterday's whiskey staining its rim. As you make your way toward the outskirts, you pass the bathhouse one last time. Steam curls from an open window, carrying with it the sharp scent of lye soap. You pause just for a moment, thinking of how strange it is that even here, where dirt seems permanent, there are still moments when people try to wash it all away. But you also know that within hours, the dust will reclaim its place, settling back onto skin, clothes, and hair like it never left. Out beyond the last row of buildings, the land opens wide, the sky a pale sheet stretching over it. You can see the river glinting in the distance, a thin ribbon winding through the brown and gold. The breeze carries the smell of dry grass, cleaner than the air in town, but still tinged with the dust of cattle and trail. You stand there a while, letting it wash over you, knowing that this is the West raw, unvarnished, and unapologetically itself. When you turn back toward the heart of town, you realize you've stopped thinking of the grit on your skin as something to get rid of. It's not just the dust of the street anymore. It's the dust of every step you've taken here, of every face you've passed, of every moment you've been part of this place. You carry it with you now, and maybe you always will. So now, as the lamps flicker to life one by one, and the day slips quietly into night, you find yourself in that rare moment when the West feels still. The voices from the saloon are muffled, the creak of wagon wheels has faded, and the only sound is the low hum of crickets somewhere out in the dark. You're standing on the boardwalk, leaning against a post, worn smooth by years of hands, looking down a street that feels almost empty. The dust hangs in the air, soft and slow in the lamplight, settling over the boards, the barrels, the steps. It's the same dust that clung to you when you first arrived. Only now it feels less like an intruder and more like an old companion. You can almost imagine it saying, "You've lasted here. You belong." In the shadows, you can see the small shapes of the town's nighttime rhythms, the man locking up the general store, the woman carrying a bucket from the pump, the stray dog trotting past on silent paws. Nothing in this place is perfectly clean, but everything carries its own kind of order, a way of keeping going in a world that never stops throwing grit in your path. And maybe that's the quiet truth about hygiene in the Wild West. It was never about shining floors or spotless hands. It was about keeping just clean enough to keep moving about, accepting that some dirt stays with you no matter how hard you try. It was about living in a balance between the dust and the work, the grime and the grit. So you take one last deep breath of this place, dust, smoke, and all, and let it settle. You've made your peace with it.